And welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast, where we talk faith, culture, and everything in between. And we're recording live here from Austin, Texas. And joining with me in studio today is none other than the Asbury Revival team. And
Hello.
by that, I guess I mean the people who went to Asbury to check out the revival. And so we're not going to talk about that on this podcast, but just so you know that these are the ones who will talk about it in a podcast in your future. So I'm very excited for that. We're going to talk about, let me introduce you first. This is Melanie, my faithful, hardcore assistant who makes all things happen, at least half the things happen here at Wells Branch Community Church. And so we are so grateful for Melanie.
I'm happy to be here.
Are you?
Uh-huh.
All right, that's good. And I also, one of my other trusty admins is Nicole, Super Trooper Troup. I am so glad that you are here and your optimism is glowing.
Oh, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm glowing under these stage lights.
Well, no, it's the glows from within.
Ah, okay.
And then also our fearless intern, Jacob Laldin. Jacob, thanks for being here.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. Always so good to be here.
All right, so we're going to talk first about this Sunday. We went through our love one another. The first week we talked about honor. The second week we talked about blessing. And this week we talked about comfort. And we went through the book of Job. Now, have any of you ever gone through a book of Job in a sermon?
In a sermon?
Yeah.
Oh, no, not in a sermon.
No.
Whole book, one sermon. Haven't seen it done before.
No, yeah, it was pretty much first time ever, all right? So we went through the whole book of Job.
Did you go through the whole book of Job?
You know, I
though?
did outline the whole book of Job. I think that
In
counts.
1 minute.
Thank you. In 1 minute, I did that, and that's important to know. So if you are like scoring at home, Job is essentially broken down to 4 parts. Job 1 and 2 is God allowing Satan to cause Job to suffer, and then like the immediate suffer that he experiences on earth. Job 3 through 37 is Job's protest and the friends that he has, their response. Then Job 38 through 41 is God's response to Job. And then finally, Job 42 is Job's repentance, Job's prayer for his friends, which activates God's will to forgive them and not judge them according to their folly, and God's restoration.
Solid.
Yeah. And there's essentially 3 arguments that come out of the book of Job. And I think this is where I want to camp just for a second. Because this represents the best of ancient Near Eastern thought, but it also, I think, represents how we think. So Job says, I'm innocent, and usually whenever Christians hear I'm innocent, we go, nah, no, you're not, sinner, right? And so I think we can all agree, though, that God says that Job is blameless and that this destruction has happened to him for no reason, right? That's in Job 1 and 2. Because, it's like, he asks Satan, where have you been? Oh, I've been going up to and fro across the earth. And then that's when God drops the bomb of, have you considered my servant Job? To which everyone's like, shh. Anyway. But Job says, I'm innocent. My suffering is not divine justice. My suffering is not divine justice. In other words, God doesn't run the world justly. That's his conclusion from the implication that his suffering is not divine justice. And he's right. He is innocent. His suffering isn't divine justice, but that doesn't mean God doesn't run the world justly. And so his argument, and this is the part where I want you guys to chime in, if you've seen this. His argument is the classic one that a lot of Americans have. And this is wild because this is the oldest book of the Bible. His argument is, if there is suffering, it's either A, God is not all powerful, or God is not all good. So what is it? Is he not all powerful and there was just something that was beyond his ability and he's like, well, sorry, I tried? Or is he kind of, Job, your life is going to suffer. All right, so which one is it? And that's the question. So have you guys come across that sort of mentality?
Oh, yeah.
All right, talk to me about it.
Oh, for sure. When I was in high school, there were a series of people very close to me who passed away. And 2 of the 3 people were also like my best friend's like grandmother and her uncle. And they happened in really close succession to each other. And I remember us like having this conversation as 17-year-olds, like, what the heck is going on? Like, why would God do something like this.
So you had, okay, this person was pretty good. Their suffering is not divine justice, or at least it shouldn't be. And so did you guys come to the conclusion God doesn't run the world justly, or that, he's not all powerful, or he's not all good?
I mean, I think it was just like at that stage in my faith, it was just like really confused. Like I just didn't really know what to think.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
What about you, Jacob? Have you experienced like that, either when you experience suffering, either God is not good or God is not all powerful?
Yeah, so I've never experienced God is not all powerful. By God's grace, I've never doubted his
Ability?
Yeah, his ability, but man, I do question, oh God, why could you let this happen? Or why did you cause this? How is this in your plan? Whether it be through a relationship going bad, or somebody doesn't show up to church when the sermon is like the best sermon and most convicting one, and I'm like, only if this person would have showed up, they'd be saved. And at the end of the day, it always works out according to his plan, and I don't see it most of the time. But
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, what about you, Melanie? Like, for you, do you run up against God isn't running the world justly, isn't all powerful, isn't all good?
I feel like I've heard that from other people. Honestly, I just don't think about things all that much. So if something bad's happening, I'm just like, well, man, this sucks, and don't really.
I mean, but you have to.
Think
No. Let's walk through this, because I don't believe that. Because I know that you don't think about things deeply, maybe in the moment, but then you spiral over that thing for like a month. Okay, a week.
Maybe, I don't know.
You mean you're telling me that when bad things happen, you just go, well, that sucks.
I mean, I sit in the, well, that sucks for like a minute, but.
And then do you move on or what?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I don't know.
So this is really good. Like, teach us your way. Is this like just a coping mechanism gone bad?
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
Almost definitely. I really should probably go see Shannon.
Shannon is
Shannon's
our
our
counselor, by the way,
Yes.
and you should come and check her out. Go to wellsbranchchurch.com/counseling.
Yeah.
Shameless plug.
No, yeah. So you really don't like have a place where you're like, huh?
I don't know.
Like there's no cause
like,
and effect going on in
Yeah,
your
all right,
head.
so,
Like, why is
yeah.
this bad happening?
Okay, yeah, all right. And
just
I think you
happens.
represent probably a majority of people who just in general don't think about stuff much. Okay, but that was not like a condescending remark, by the way. That was just a reality.
No, I thought that was hilarious.
Okay, so for me, I think in combat, and this is where a lot of guys struggle. When I was at war, and I was telling war stories the other day. I was with another former soldier, and he and I were at Mesa Rosa having lunch, which is actually a great place to have lunch if you have kids, because they can run around on the playground. Anyway, so I'm sitting with him. We're talking war stories. We're going back and forth. And just sort of the reality that you'd face is that there would be death dealt by a terrorist, or even like just in the crossfire, or an accident would happen. Like, somebody would they didn't know they were crossing in, or they didn't see all the signs. They missed the concertina wire, and they're just driving along. Think they're like in a maze on the highway, and they're going to drive around it and drive through it, and then they get shot because it looked like they were trying to run a car bomb into something. And after you experience a couple car bombs, you're a little itchy on the trigger finger. So I guess that's what I'm saying is, like, people would die, people would get really massively hurt. And so from that perspective, you're like, what was the point of that? And because I think it goes to this point, if people are made in the image of God, the Imago Dei, and the Imago Dei represents God, for it to, and this is specifically on life, because I think for single people, you're usually talking about relationships. You'd rather die than be alone. I get it. That's normal. But for people that have like families and stuff, like death becomes a really important thing, and it becomes like, oh my gosh, how could God let this happen? So I have experienced that sort of reality where soldiers saw that and they said there must be no God, or this great divide between good and evil, and we've got to do our part of the good because the evil is out there, and we've got to be the good, and God help us to fight the evil. But it was a dualistic sort of view. Okay.
Yeah, man, I hear that all the time. Like I meet soldiers and I'm talking to them about their faith. They're like, yeah, like when I was out there in the Middle East and just seeing everything I saw, like I just started questioning, like, is there a God? If there's a God, how could all of this happen?
Right. That's good. Okay, so that's and we'll get to solutions here in a second, but we're just going to present arguments. So the second argument that's presented is by the three friends, which are I guess Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, which is just three awesome names. They definitely need a movie about those three guys. And their argument is essentially the common argument of that day, and I would bet the common argument of the heart, no matter if you're a Christian or not a Christian, okay? It's the karma argument.
Yeah.
Okay, so they argue karma. They'd say God is just, God runs the world with justice, and so if this has happened to you, Job, you must have sinned. In fact, what they do for Job is they reenact all the sins he did, like, you threw out widows, you didn't help the orphans, you didn't pay people on time, you abused people, and like we know from God that Job was blameless. But here you have it. It's like, nah, there's too much. The correlation of bad things has to lead us to the belief that causation is you doing evil caused these bad things to happen. Now, Melanie, do you ever experience karma? Like, do you ever and what I mean by that is, do you ever go, bad things happen to me because I must have done something?
I think so.
Okay, and tell me how that manifests itself.
Gosh, I feel like there's like always kind of a like, oh, I did this, that put me in this situation, and now, well, I deserve it, I guess. So
okay,
I'm trying to think of a specific.
No, yeah, this is where. How about for a relationship, if you got like this, let's go to our dating people over here. Like if you're in a relationship and you're like, why did this happen? And then you go, well, if I wasn't nice to the previous girlfriend, and so therefore I deserve this one. Jacob, that's you. Like, did you ever feel like that?
I don't know if I feel quite like that. However, in everything I do, I'm always looking for the cause and effect. And my sin, my poor choices are always the cause. And the effect, well, I mean, that's just the ramification of sin. So
yeah, there you go. Okay, so what about you, Nicole? Do you think the same thing about Jacob? No, I'm just kidding.
I was thinking about that, and I was like, his relationships, it sounds like, have gotten better.
Yeah.
And then they tanked a little bit.
That's okay.
And now he's here.
He's here, and that's what makes him so great. And so Jacob's single, by the way, but not on the table.
But not ready to mingle.
Not ready for you. So stand by, and you can send your submissions in to the number on the screen, which is 737-231-0605, and we'll put you on the wait list. Okay, so what do you think then when it comes to karma? And because there is a biblical notion, you do reap what you sow, right? Like
Yeah.
I think that, and to be fair, so I think that in Proverbs is like if you sin, bad things are going to happen. So for me, when bad things happen, there's a tendency for me to go, what is the cause of that? And what we're going to learn through this whole experience is it may not be, because clearly in Job's case, it wasn't because of something you did. The story I told on Sunday is like one of my favorite jokes is like, if it's ever raining, you go like, oh man, it's raining. That's just God crying. It's probably because of something you did. And I love that. And I shared that with Austin, and then he shares that, and it's it just the joke goes forward, and it's terrible. Don't do that. But I think that that's sort of where we can go, and you can get into a lot of guilt complex. I remember back in the day that whenever Katrina, it was like the Hurricane Katrina, and everyone was saying like that was Hurricane Katrina was the punishment for all of New Orleans' sin. Like, it was like, this is the Big Easy. There is a lot of dark things that happen in New Orleans, so therefore, God brought the Katrina. And I was like, that's a broad statement. And that's saying that is exactly what those three friends did in this situation. They looked at the bad thing that happened and said, well, clearly you must have sinned. Well, in New Orleans is easy pickings. You're like, well, you must have sinned, right? And so I think that's where I think some people go.
Yeah,
I mean, this goes as far back as 13th century Europe with the plague. Like they said the
Yeah.
same thing about the plague. The same thing. And they were like, well, this must be God's justice for all our sin. And
Right.
it's like, a third of Europe has to die because we all suck.
Right. And so we don't know. You don't know what God is doing. And I think that gets us to Elihu's response. He says God is just, and comes the same implication that the three friends did, that God runs the world justly. But then he goes to Job, and I think this is how you operate, Melanie. Who cares what happened in the past? Just right now with what you can do. Job was sinning by assuming the worst of God in his suffering. So in those moments, just like, and this is where, I think it was chapter 36, where Elihu says to Job, take care, do not turn to iniquity, for this you have chosen rather than affliction. So you do a good job of sitting in the suck of the affliction.
Do I?
Well, do you turn to
Are
sin?
you looking at me?
Yes, I'm looking at you because you would know.
Are you her conscience?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
so-
I guess so.
We spend a lot of time together.
That's good. Do you
Spend
guys
a lot
actually
of time
like each
around
other?
crying
Yeah,
people. We do.
Of course we do.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, it's amazing that people can spend that much time with around each other and still like each other.
Yeah.
It's a special
We were talking about
relationship
this
that we
this
have.
morning.
Yeah.
It is very
We
special.
were saying it's probably a good thing we don't live together because that might be a little bit too much time.
Yeah, that
but,
might be
yeah.
more time than we could handle.
Well, you also have another roommate.
Yeah, that
Well,
too.
I have a roommate. She has a husband.
Yes.
It's different.
Yeah.
That is true. Very
yeah.
true.
But yeah, I don't.
So do you
I don't
do you,
know if I
do you
do.
sit in the suffering? I mean, that's what like. Do you choose to just like, God, you're causing me to suffer. I am now going to suffer properly.
I probably do. I do sit in my own suffering, probably a little bit too much, actually. And for other people, I might accidentally just sit in their suffering with them because I never know what to say, so I just don't.
Hey, actually, as we learned in the first part, not saying anything is
Yeah.
actually a great ministry.
Yeah.
Way to go. Okay, so Elihu says Job is assuming the worst of God in your suffering. So you can do two things, and I can go either one of these. And so what helps me is I can like look at people, and when bad things are happening to me, I blame them. Or like if there's a difficult thing, I'm like, clearly not my fault, your fault, right? And so there's that option too, right? Like I'm innocent and I'm amazing.
I do no wrong.
I do no wrong. And then the other part is I could assume, God, don't you know what you're doing? And so what I have to repent and align my life to is like, God is in control even when bad things happen, okay? And then on the flip side, I know this is going to sound, well, of course God's in control when good things happen, but it makes sense. And so, in fact, I sent, our church has experienced growth in February, and I can't figure out why. It's an interesting phenomenon. So in numbers world, we grew by about 30, 40% in the month of February, which is wild. And I'm trying to, and I sent the elders a text going, hey guys, here's our numbers. Why is this? And they kind of listed off a bunch of things. And I was like, yeah, but all that stuff we were doing before January, like none of that stuff is really different. And then what Brad, one of our elders, said, hey, or maybe we've been faithful all along. Maybe it's nothing we have done. God works in his time, and he has now sent us people he wants us to minister to. And I'm confident God blesses his people. So much confident in the timing, much less so confident in the timing or what that looks like. And I was like, man, that is actually really, really awesome that Brad said that in a time of good things, right? Like good things are happening. And so in the same way, there could be something that God is wanting to work in you when hard things are happening. And I think that's the whole message of Job, which then gets us to the way that we comfort one another who are experiencing hard things, and we don't have the reason why, and assuming the reason why is going to bring pain on somebody. And so that gets us to the great Melanie over here, who does a great job of suffering with people by just sitting there awkwardly. So tell me about how you've learned to sit awkwardly with people and just sort of let it all happen.
I'll tell you a story I just told my road trip friends, which is the first time I remember somebody just like crying, and I was there, and I was like, I don't really know what to do. And I think I've improved a little bit since then because I just sort of stared at her while she cried because I had no idea what was happening. But I didn't say anything, so that means I didn't say anything wrong.
Good. So like, were you like this?
I was literally sitting like 10 feet across the room, just like, I don't know what to do with this.
Well, Adrian's the same
So
way.
what I
You
have
and Adrian
learned
are
is
similar.
you go sit next to them.
Oh, good job. All right, that's good.
Like put an arm around their shoulder and just like sit, and then it's a lot more comforting than just staring at them while they cry. Yeah. Yeah.
There have been
Still feel a
times
little
where
bad about that
Adrian
one, but-
Adrian, you were similar in that.
Yeah.
There have been times where I'm like, really ministering to somebody, kind of put my arm around it, and she just leaves.
Yeah.
And she's like, "You got this. All right, all right."
Yeah.
I guess.
Oh no.
I'm like, okay, I'll take it from here. So there's
Wow.
people have different levels of comfort when it comes to suffering. And so, what about you, Nicole? How good are you at comforting someone just in silence?
In silence, I'm terrible. I just start talking. I try to like find the silver lining in everything.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
is
That's when I stopped
I've
listening.
realized like that's the worst thing to do.
It's not the worst. There's like a hierarchy. That the worst would be like telling them how bad they are.
I definitely don't tell people that they deserve to suffer.
Well, they do. That's ironic, right? They do deserve to suffer because we're all sinners, but by God's grace, Jesus died on the cross for us, rose from the dead, and so now we're living in joyful. So it's
That's true, but like a lot of the time I find myself comforting people who are not Christians and
Ooh.
telling them like, well, you're a sinner.
Yeah.
That's like not what you do.
yeah, in general.
That's
and,
not compassionate.
Yeah,
you know,
it
and like,
doesn't honor them.
exactly. And so yeah, I
How
mean,
do you,
I just,
how do you comfort somebody who's not a Christian? Is this the silver lining part?
yeah.
Which I guess it's better than telling them.
Well,
that
at least it's usually like, well,
like,
at
well,
least
you're not in hell yet. I mean,
well, no, I mean, yeah, I try to find like positive things, like I don't know, like at least their dog died, and it's like, well, at least you don't have to take care of a dog anymore.
wow.
I don't know. I'm like having a hard time because I can't think of a tangible.
That would probably, hey,
I can't
You
think
know
of
what?
like a tangible.
you don't need
example.
that dog bowl anymore. We'd probably make a fortune on eBay. Or like on
See,
Facebook
those are
Marketplace.
like
I'm
always
not
the first
that,
things
like-
I think. I just
You
don't say
think
them
like
out
that? Do you
loud.
really?
I'm
Yes,
not
I
that
do.
out of touch.
Both of my
like
cats
just to be
died.
clear.
Okay,
The
so what do
first
you
thing I
say?
did was
I-
like, hey, I can go buy puzzles now because they're not going to ruin them. This is great.
I think for
least
me,
it was my
like
cats.
also a lot of comfort is like physical touch. So I give a lot of hugs.
Yeah,
Even though I
that's
don't really like hugs, or
Oh, you're not a hugger.
I'm not a hugger.
Okay.
No, I don't like being touched
Touched.
in general.
Okay.
I think it's really cool to like have an opportunity to comfort someone who's not a Christian because you really see where all of their hope is placed
Yep.
in those moments.
That's true.
Yeah, and then that also, if you comfort well by like just saying, "Man, this is bad. Isn't this awful?" Kind of going down that road with him, then you're able to say, "Isn't the world broken?" And then, wouldn't it be great if somebody could fix it? And I'm not saying you need to do that in that first iteration, but because comforting, I feel like you earn that right to be heard in those moments because you could just thunder down the gospel and be like, you're going to hell unless you repent. Or you said, that's why we need Jesus. That's why the world needs Jesus, because it is that broken. It is this bad. It is that bad, but God is that good, that he did send his son Jesus to die on the cross for our sins and for the brokenness of humanity. Because hurt people. The reason why this thing has happened is because of sin. Whether that is a relationship breakup or somebody dying, either way, it's because of sin.
That maybe it makes me think of, so maybe like a year and a half ago, my dad was diagnosed with throat cancer, and he's smoked for like 30 years of his life. So it's not a surprise.
Is this where you say you
really
got what you
common.
deserve?
No, but like, okay, so I freaked out because my dad, both my grandmothers died of cancer, and cancer sucks, and people die from it all the time, but people also survive it all the time.
Yeah. Oh,
And
nice.
my dad was incredibly hopeful. My dad, who at the time was not a believer, was incredibly hopeful. And he comforted me. With
Aw.
this hope that he had. Because like they caught it early and everything. And he was just confident that it would be okay.
Okay, so I do love this part. I think in comfort, I think sharing your own hurts, like You don't want to do a one-upper, but you can say, man, I've been there.
Yeah.
Like, that's hard. This reminds me when my dad got throat cancer. If you're dealing with somebody, and like, man, it was so hard. That news just was crushing.
Well, and my older brother, who has a different dad, his dad had also a similar cancer, and that was also a comfort. Like, knowing that kind of cancer is really common, and seeing his dad come through that, and like that doesn't mean that you won't suffer. Like, my dad knew that it would be really, really hard. That treatment would be very uncomfortable and painful and difficult, but that ultimately he would still have his life.
So one of the things I've found is that when I say to people, usually it's on marriage counseling issues, and they'll tell me their problem, and I go, oh man, good news. That's everybody's problem. And so I think that is comforting, but there are probably those people out there like, I want to be unique. I want to be, but I don't think so, because I think you'd want to hear, what I'm going through is what people go through, and there are people on the other side of this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So sitting with somebody in their suffering is empathy, and that is, let's talk about how to do empathy. And I'm going to challenge Melanie here. Melanie, let's talk about empathy.
Okay.
I'm going to just give you this is a crash course, just
Yeah.
in case you find yourself in this position again. Because when you think empathy, what do you think of?
Feelings. Feeling other
Melanie's
people's
arch
feelings.
nemesis.
Yeah. So, and honestly,
not very good at
the primary spokesman for empathy is Bill Clinton from back in the day. I feel your pain, right? Like that's the guy. So it's like, so what you do to empathize is you would say, man, if that were happening to me, I don't know how I'd respond, or I would respond just with anger and hurt. And I can imagine that you're feeling a lot of those things. Oh, this is so hard. And you sort of go there with them. The hard part is like you don't go too far where you just kind of push them over the edge of despair. You're like, you're right, it's awful. So how do we then, at a place of empathy, how do we turn the corner and give people comfort to that things are going to be okay? Jake, what do you think?
My belief is things are always going to be okay. And so I tell people, things are going to be okay. They might not turn out how you want them to. You might get a divorce. You might lose your dog. You might X, Y, and Z. I mean, we could go on forever.
You know what, Jacob? I think you can get away with that. You are really gifted. And I think honestly, I think your advice is actually not bad. And here's what I mean.
You also say it like with such a happy voice and a smile on your face that it's like hard to be mad at you.
Yeah, no, but also I think there's truth in it, and you need people to encourage you. Like, we can do this. I think what you do a great job of, just personally watching you, Jacob, is that you kind of get there with people, and you're an encourager from a standpoint of like, I'm with you in the pain, but I can see how we can get out of this. And I think that's what creates the pilgrimage journey. And every great story starts out with pain.
Yeah.
And so I think what happens for you, Jacob, and I don't know if this is what you think about it, I think you get to resolution really, really quickly. And so somebody who's suffering, they're feeling the climax of their pain, and you kind of like, it's just like Rocky, it's just like, Top Gun. It's just like, think of your movie, right? Like whatever that is. And you're like, this is just the part where it's really hard. But in the end, God is going to come through, because if it's not good, he's not done. And I think that you do a good job of doing that. How do you think, so with that message, what are some ways that when we're encouraging people, we can like anti-encourage them? Like, what do you think is sort of some anti-encouragement? Does that make sense? Like the attempt, you're like, I really want you to feel better, but I'm going, what are some things that you've heard or had spoken to you or something that's said? You
really screwed up this time.
And honestly, okay, that could be someone trying to use humor. So here's an interesting, and this is in marriage anyway. A repair technique in marriage is, one is physical touch, which we know Nicole's not for. And the other one is humor. So you probably go the humor route. Or would you go the physical touch route? Like a touch is like that kind of touch to
No, I'd
kind of
probably
repair.
go the touch route.
Okay.
I don't. And
So you don't
humor in sad situations is not where I thrive.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah, so I think what can happen is someone doesn't know what to say, so they make a joke to kind of like, they think they're really helping out, and then it spirals from there. How about some other ways that or going to what Elihu's friends did, and what a buddy of mine experienced was like he had just told us that he'd gotten out of prison after aggravated assault, just stuff that was bad, and he couldn't get a job because he was a felon, or he couldn't get a job, he couldn't get an apartment because he was a felon, and the counsel at that moment, the comfort was like, well, sin has its consequences, and I think that's true. And if he hadn't done aggravated assault back in the day, he probably wouldn't have been in that position. But I think that's where he already knew what he did was wrong. And now he just needed the comfort of like, God can bring about something really special, and leaning into the Lord to trust him.
Yeah, man, that's such a good example. And like, as I'm thinking about your question, like, what are some bad examples? I know that we've talked about this. Like, don't tell someone who just like confess their deepest, darkest sin. Like, all right, this is what you need to do now. Like, here's your 3-step solution is what, what we've said here.
Oh, yeah.
Or like, as they get to the consequence of their sin, be like, yeah, you see, you shouldn't have gone to prison. You should have done the deed.
Talk to me about this. Speaking of that, because I feel like this happens, and I mentioned this on Sunday, is do you feel like people share about, like someone wants to share and they'll confess some sin or something really difficult, and then their vulnerability is crushed by somebody giving like, here's what you should have done kind of thing? Have you guys ever experienced that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that happens all the time. And the crummy part is like in a group of
Except
10,
at our church, of course.
Yeah, no, that doesn't happen here, never.
That's really funny.
But like in a group of 10 people, one person confesses and 8 guys love him super well.
Right.
But then there's one guy who just shuts him down, and he tries to tell him everything he should do. And this guy didn't. He already knows what he should do. He doesn't. But he just can't get there. Right. Yeah, exactly. And man, it's so like I think it really just takes like that one guy to like kind of try to tell you what to do.
One bad apple
ruins the whole bushel.
I'm
Ruins
that
the
bad
whole
apple.
bushel.
Are you the bad apple?
Yeah, I like to give people solutions.
Oh
no.
Oh, that's hard, right?
Yeah.
In the middle community group.
I don't know. No, I mean,
Like someone shares something. I don't know if this happens in your group.
maybe I've
Do you-
done
I don't think
it
I don't
hasn't
think I've
happened
seen you do
recently.
that.
Okay, we're
On a
giving
Monday.
Nicole a
No,
little more credit than that.
I definitely have done that.
Okay, in a group.
I probably have done it in a group. I mean, I've grown a lot in the last year, so
Well, that's good.
I have come to realize that is not a good thing to do. And so now, even one-on-one, I'll like Melanie was wanting to talk about some stuff the other day, and I asked her, I was like, okay, like, do you just want me to listen, or do you want me to give you solutions?
Nailed it.
Great
And she was like,
question.
I just want
Great
you to
question.
listen. And I'm like, okay, I'll listen.
Nice.
And make all the right noises.
And make all the, yeah.
And if you don't feel confident enough to ask that question, just make all the right noises until they say, so what do you think I should do? And that's that's when your cue is.
Yeah, and that's the thing that she told me. She was like, if I need help with a solution, I will ask.
Right.
For one.
But
So-
sometimes there's like, if I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. Like, I think there's a problem that, that we'll have to face is like, you don't want to empathize with somebody in their sin, right? You don't want to kind of go like, they're in this relationship that's absolutely toxic, and you're just like, oh gosh, I know it's really hard that you're going through this really awful breakup, but the nail in your head is that girl you're dating or guy
Yeah.
you're dating, right? And so like, all we got to do is take some pliers and get her out of your life. And that is going to solve everything. So how do you like when someone's that clear, like if someone's dating a non-Christian and they're like, or they're sleeping with them and they can't see, they're like, I'm just in love, but it hurts so bad and they just treat me. And you're just like, oh, this is so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Wow. Have you experienced that, Nicole?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Tell
So
us.
I'm on the receiving end of a lot of like hurt of that my friends have from their relationships, and like that's the experience that I have of that. And a lot of times I will like sit and listen. I'm like, yes, I know this is hard. And I'll be like, he's not that great. Like, he shouldn't be treating you like this. But eventually I get to a point where I'm like ready for some tough love, because I have endured hours of this or like months of hearing them talk about their problems. And then I'm just like, you just need to break up with him. Okay. Or like, stop going, like, I have friends who will like go back to the same toxic guy over and over and over again, and I'm like, why would you make the same mistake twice?
Or 4 times.
What makes you think that it's going to be any different? Oh, he's changed. No, he hasn't. Maybe a little bit, but not enough.
Wow. So this is
Yeah.
where Nicole is taking us off the dark edge of like people don't change. And I get that they are that bad, but God is that good. You'd have to see some unbelievable evidence to kind of step back into that.
Well, and like,
reality.
people can change, but in the span of 2 months, probably not.
Probably not.
And even if they change, it doesn't mean that their relationship dynamic is going to change.
Thank
Because
you.
like
That's
they're-
the bigger thing, because I think they might have changed. Because don't you tell me if this isn't true? Do you sort of revert back to your teenage version of yourself whenever you go home?
Yes.
So that's what happens when people go back to bad relationships. So this might be free advice for the person that's like, I didn't think this was about relationship. Yes, it is. For you, it is.
It's always about
It's always about relationships. Here's the reality for you, right? You're back in this relationship and you revert back to the person that's like the abused like person that just like takes it, and you like for some odd reason just like, oh, you just don't understand. No, we do understand. Clearly, you have a problem, and whenever you're around that person, you revert back to the victim. So stop it. Leave that relationship. So I don't know who I need to share that with, but I felt like it needed to be said.
yeah, I think it did too.
Okay.
On a comforting note, I just want to like revisit this. So
Yeah,
I had
sorry.
a buddy kind of.
We got a lot of tough love there.
Yeah, he came to me. He calls me one night and he's like, dude, like things are just not going well. Like a lot of dysfunction with a relationship. Not even sure if she was a believer.
Right.
Maybe a little suicidal.
Yeah.
Actually, completely. And anyway, so I just had this unique opportunity to share a previous relationship that I was in, and so I didn't have to play his through to the end and give him tough love. And I was like, man, I feel you. I know it's rough. And I just had the opportunity to, like I said, play my relationship to the end and be like, this is what happened for me, and it might happen for you. And I didn't have to really tell him anything beyond that. And then a few weeks later, it kind of came to a fruition. And, he had the foresight because of that.
So here's where I want to land the plan of this, because it's not just relationships that people need a lot of comfort. It's in really facing life, death, sickness, all financial struggle. The biggest thing that I think we can do is call someone to trust God more. You say, like, why is this happening? God is asking you to trust him. And here, there are some verses that I have kind of just plotted out for a lot of people. We know, Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose.
I comfort that.
That is so comforting.
It
Like
is.
If it's not good, it's not done.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we want to really kind of leave people with. And if you're like, but why? Okay, why would God want to do this? Well, then that's James 1:2-8 says, count all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for I love that that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Part of your suffering may be so that you would have more deeper understanding and empathy for others. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, which means he won't turn you away, and it will be given him. If you don't know, you lack wisdom, ask God, he'll give you the wisdom. And the wisdom might be, you need to be perfect and complete, and you need to know how to suffer. And that can be hard to handle, but at least God says he promises to answer you to the why God thing. And so the part then, are you going to accept that answer? And that's verse 6-8. But let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts, like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. Well, what do you mean? Why would they doubt? Well, if you're questioning God, I don't know if you're good. I don't know if this is best for me. No. What you're going through right now is best for you. What you're going through right now is God loving you, and he's wanting to show you something, and you've got to trust him in it. And so then finally, if you don't trust him, that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. So.
Yeah.
All right, I think that wraps that up. So thankful for all of you joining in and listening. If you've got questions, text us at 737-231-0605. We would love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. So from our house to yours, have an awesome week.